said, well, he goes, yeah, I want to talk to Prince. Why don't you have me see Prince? And so I start to argue with him on the phone and tell him, he thinks I'm setting up an interview with the Vikings backup linebacker. I'm like, it's not that easy. And he wouldn't take no for an answer. He shows up to there, and I thought I was going to be able to further explain, and I still couldn't get anywhere. And he's like, no, I just want to see him for a little bit. And so I said, all right. And I, did something that I'm like, why am I doing this? But here we go. So we get to checkpoint number 1. I just flash a credential, and I just said, follow me. We get to checkpoint number 2. I said, don't say a word. Just let me handle this. And the guy just looked at us, and he's like, this guy's 90 years old. What problem is he going to cause? Because my credential would work, but his wouldn't.
Right.
So we finally get to the last checkpoint, and the guy says, you can't go any further than this, even with the top credential. And I had to think on my feet, and I just said, sir, with all due respect, the guy about to go on stage and this guy I got right here are the 2 most famous people in Minnesota. And he let us through, and we walked through, and Prince was walking down this long hall. He's just about to turn to go onto stage, and Sid yells at the top of his lungs, hey, Prince! Hey, Prince! And we have about 15 security guys come across the 2 of us, and Prince stops, turns around very slowly, and parts the sea of all these people and walks all the way back to us and has a 5-minute conversation with Prince. And it was pretty amazing. It really was.
Do you remember what they talked about? I mean, because I'm wondering if Prince,
they went to the same high school, 50 years apart.
There you go. Yeah.
But they started talking. They talked Vikings, and they talked Timberwolves because he had been a season ticket holder at both. And they talked sports for a little bit, and they said, nice to see you. And to this day, Sid just thinks that was easy to set up, and that just
of course
happenstance.
Well, about his insistence to get what he wants, I'm sure that's not the first time, even though that's a very unusual circumstance, that's not the first time you had to go toe-to-toe with him, and I'm sure almost be forced to surrender, right? I mean, that is really the story of his approach journalistically, was he's just irrepressible. I mean, he was one of those guys who was not going to take no for an answer.
No, I think his persistence and drive is what, really separates him, from the rest of the crowd. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, and then we'd spend weeks trying to set up a certain person, for an interview that he'd want. And the second you'd get it, the second he finished that interview, he'd ask for the next biggest person right then. It's like,
yes.
So what have you done for me lately? But he was always on top of things, and, just amazing with that.
Did you guys ever do what Louis said occasionally they did in hockey, hide his tape recorder, put it in the freezer or anything to kind of get him going?
Well, there was guys who did that. I mean, when I first started the Vikings, he would travel on the road trips on the plane, coming home from the game.
Sure.
And we'd have those name tags on every seat on the plane, so the players and coaches and front office people knew where to sit. And we would be just going through the regular MSP airport, and as people would walk by, they would slap their name tag on his back. And so he'd be walking through the Minneapolis airport with 50 of these tags on his back, and then he would turn to me and he'd say, "God, they love me. They all love me." And we would play a game 7 days later, and the same thing would happen over again, and he would never figure it out. And he'd get home, and he'd have 50 of these players' name tags on his back.
What are you going to do with yourself, man? Honestly, it's such obviously a part of who you are. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but I say it in part because you should feel so good about the relationship and about all those times that you had together. The total investment that you have in him should, to me, be the comfort at a time like this, because you had all of that, and it's going to be sad to not have it, but at least you had it, and you had it in a way that a lot of people can't even begin to appreciate. That's got to be the strength for you right now.
Yeah, it is, and a lot of times when maybe a pet peeve of mine when people die and they're older, people are like, oh, he's 100 years old, he's a great life. And I say, that is correct, but that means you also knew him longer. So it makes it that much tougher. So, I just, it's going to be tough. We had that 100th lunch planned at Louie's place. It was a great guest you just had on. And that was going to be on Tuesday, March 17th. And you made the list this year.
I know. I was shocked that you even made the list.
And I had 100 people come.
Better yet, I was going to go, which being the hermit I am, that in itself was amazing.
Yeah. So, I think of all the great times. Yeah. I had tons of people in my office today, telling some of the stories that sometimes I didn't even know. And, just a remarkable person. He's been great to the Vikings. He's been great to the Wilf family when they took over. He's been great to this entire community and this entire region. He will be missed.
I really, Bob Hagan, Media Relations, Minnesota Vikings, I really appreciate the time, your willingness to open up, and you're to be commended for your devotion to him and far beyond your job, which obviously, because he became a friend to you and became something far more personal as well, and you're to be commended for that. We always appreciate your contributions. You know that very much, and we're thinking of you today because I know it's hitting you probably as hard as pretty much anybody for reasons that I think will be apparent to anybody who listened to this interview. Thanks again, Bobby.
All right, thanks for having me on.
Much appreciated. That is Bob Hagan, Minnesota Vikings. We'll get a short segment here, attempt to get caught up again, and then we'll prepare to chat with Patrick Royce, the official Sid Hartman biographer.
The Fan.
Yeah, we're doing it again. The Fan and Wixon Jewelers want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand. It's our national cash contest. Text the keyword family to 200-200 to enter. Text family to 200-200.
The series of My Guy stories, my best My Guy Sid story goes back to one that Steve Ashburner passed along to me. There was I don't know if it might have been the Wolves' first year. They were playing the Lakers. I don't remember when it was exactly, but I was either ill or I couldn't be at the game, which killed me because it was Magic, and Magic was my guy. Well, so I thought. And, well, no, actually, I'm thinking wrong about this. This was an occasion where I was there and was having a short conversation with him, and Ashburner either was with Sid or Sid said something to Ashburner like, well, what's Barreiro doing talking to Magic? He goes, well, he kind of knows him from, he covered a lot of NBA stuff back, in his days at Dallas Morning News. And then there was that long pause, and Sid did the old, well, he was Magic's guy. I can't do Sid's voice. Magic's guy before, I was Magic's guy before Barreiro was. So these stories are out. They're not made up. They're legendary, and everybody's got 1, 2, or 3, or perhaps 4 or 5 of them. I know we're going to have some fun with Royce on a couple of memories I have that affected both of us that would be Sid-related as well. We are going to run part 2 of our conversation with Bud Grant at about 5:55 today. We figured we'll get that towards the end part of the program as well. Hagan was great, wasn't he? Bob Hagan, again, a name that is not as well known just because of what he does. He's well known in the media business, obviously. But once again, this is a guy who literally, same with Bud. Hagan became sort of their go-to guy when it came to meeting, coming together, setting up lunches, etc.
He is Hall of Fame lunch setter-upper.
One of the greats.
He's connected. He was part, I think, of connecting, along with Dark Star, Ron Rosenbaum's dinner.
There's no question.
Through all of that. That's Bob's unbelievable in that.
He derives great, I think, satisfaction out of bringing people together. And that's a nice asset to have. Let's pause, get caught up, and we will chat with, as I mentioned, Sid Hartman's official and unofficial biographer, Patrick Royce.
The Fan.
I got a postcard.
Well, you guys sat here 5 weeks ago and said that it's over, period.
Sure, man.
But here we are. I mean,
You said they're going to come back, right?
yeah, I did.
I knew that.
I never got off the bandwagon one time. And you jumped off so fast,
Your memory,
it made your head spin.
Your memory
You
is...
can't even remember where you parked your car. So don't start with me.
We ought to take this goddamn show. We'd find out what you said and what you didn't say.
You've been using that weak routine of yours for about 300 years.
That's a good thing.
This is a joke.
It's a good thing you knew it because the manager didn't.
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell Gardy?
I was gonna mention it to him.
And the general manager didn't.
Yeah. But this is a few.
And some of the players didn't.
Let me know when you're done.
I'm done.
I think most people know the voices. Dark Star was in there, Maxie, Sid, and our next guest, Patrick Royce, kind enough to join us as well. I assume it is true, sir, that the stuff that was left on during the commercials or on the cutting room floor from the sports show would probably be even more riveting than the actual TV show itself, correct?
Between breaks when Dark and Sid let their entire animosity for one another leak out, it was always intriguing. They had the advantage of doing a show together when they really couldn't stand each other. There was about 6 days a year when Dark and Sid got along, and the rest of the time, because Dark would not bow to Sid's
right.
Omnipotent status in the Twin Cities, and that drove Sid nuts. So,
which meant,
and you know what was the kicker?
What's that?
When Darky showed up at the front table with Knobloch when he signed.
That's right.
Remember when Knobloch invited him up there for the Sun? That was the end for Sidney.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. That's a classic. You and I think, had kind of the same reaction to the news yesterday. You mentioned, that it's a testament to Sid that the man's 100 years old and you're still shocked that there's an announcement that he's passed away. I came at it similarly, just said the old World According to Garp book by Irving, in which he says we're all terminal cases, and that Sid was the one guy that had me questioning the premise. I mean, that's the irony of this thing, or maybe the proof of how dominant he was, is we were still surprised that it happened.
Yeah, and after you left us from full-time radio, and I kind of did some of that myself, he became even more insecure. He would not take a day off. He would not take a week off anymore. I mean, it was amazing how much he needed it, and how much he needed to be in that paper 3-4 days a week. And it's kind of a interesting psychological mystery that I would never be able to solve.
No,
his need for it was unbelievable, and it's that he was still going. I did have one last chance to tell him, and I did, to talk to him during the pandemic, and I said, Sid, the pandemic has made you even more of a homer. It's unbelievable. He never wrote a pandemic column that wasn't a complete kiss up to some team in town. He was Sid to the utter finish, I'll say that.
Do you remember back in the day where early Sunday columns were a thing, and if we weren't writing on deadline, there was hope that we would submit them Friday night in order to get the outstate edition out? And so the bit would be that Sid would come in Saturday, noonish, and the first thing he would have done, he would order, is that somebody, some minion, would have to print your column if it was already in, and or my column if it was already in, so that he knew exactly what we'd written, and he could either rebut it in his own Sunday column, or if it was a feature column, write like 9 paragraphs about that individual as well. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, it was unbelievable. I did love the ones where he cut you off at the pass.
Yes, yes.
That's the one you bring, and I used to always tell him, don't give that bleeping bleeper
a copy of the column when he came in. Whoever was in there, I said, "Don't let him see it." "Oh, that's okay. Get it in." Yeah, he was unbelievable.
Well, how about McEnroe and Eisen when they were doing investigative stuff?
Oh yeah,
they had to hide in another part of the building, that secret cubbyhole of theirs, because they knew especially if it was a Gopher related deal, if Sid found out about it, the cat was going to be out